This is the third episode of this play-by-play series I'm doing, and this is week 4 of the big game, episode 1. Um, this was probably the best TV cash game I played in because we not only had a loose cannon, we had a businessman, and he was the real loose cannon, Rick Rahim. Had a guy named Troy Howard who was the loose cannon. Played pretty solid, pretty much like you expect a loose cannon to play. He didn't gamble up. He in a again protecting his chips, hoping something good will happen, but not that much good happened to him, it seemed. And the other professional players besides myself, there are 3 other professional players. You see Antonio to my left, and Antonio, I've known him since he's first gotten into poker. He wasn't that good a player, I guess, like none of us are initially. And I don't think he was much of a cash game player, just kind of dabble in tournaments. But over the years, he's become a really good cash game player. I've seen on some of these like high stakes poker shows where it seemed he was playing a little bit out of his element, playing bigger than he's used to. He tightened up. But when he plays his normal stake, like I played, I think a 25-50 or I think it was 25-50 blind game with him, he was really tough. Mixed it up. Just was a good player. And Chow's, one of the best poker players in the world. In this particular episode, he played pretty tight. When I said this episode, this whole week, there are 5 episodes in a week. People didn't really get to see Chow. He got behind early, and one of the things that happens on these TV shows is people bring a certain amount of money, maybe to a show like this with a $100,000 buy-in. Maybe they bring 200,000, 2 bullets. And even if they have money at home, it's not always clear they can borrow money across the table. Depends how deep other people are, and it changes their play. And I think that happened to Chow. He got behind, and usually he's a tough guy to run over, and he'll play a lot of hands. And we didn't see that much of it here. People didn't get a flavor, and we've seen the same thing, with some of the internet players on some of the other shows where they're action online. Then they come to a live setting. They don't have a lot of money behind them. Sometimes they're pieced out. Chow, I'm sure, wasn't, but whatever. They don't play their normal game. And again, this can happen anytime you're on television where you get behind and it takes you out of your game. And then the third professional player was on my right. We don't see him in this picture. Viffer, David Pete. He and I have played several times together. He's a good action player, but the last time I played with him, actually, in No Limit, he played really, really solid. It surprised me because he had gone off a couple times when I played with him where he was trying to be pretty flamboyant. But I saw that he has a complete game. He can play. It was a game where people were giving you action whether you were playing hands or not. And we've seen me do this on some of the TV shows, too. I've actually coming to the TV shows is kind of funny. I'd always been known as a real loose player. And then once the TV show started, I was getting action by people trying to make plays and show off on TV. And I found out I could get paid off playing solid. And it was like, I still play for money, and it was a sure way to make money to not get out and try to outdance people. Just let them do the dancing and catch them, and make some well-timed bluffs. That's pretty much how my TV games evolved. So let's start with let's get this rolling with the first hand here. That I play in this episode. It seems like I play a lot of hands in this episode. I played 9, actually 10. I skipped one where it was a limped pot and I didn't do anything. And so let's
like 30,000. But we both have the same bet. So.
What's the Tupperware thing though? Like just pre-made meals?
Yeah, my
dietitian or whatever.
Yeah.
Who you been?
Brian Rast.
Oh, Brian, wow. He drink too, right?
He drinks, but not for long.
Brian Rast is another professional poker player.
Antonio's raised to 1100.
I definitely drink more than Brian Rast.
And action is folded around to Barry, who calls.
Barry's decided he wants to defend his big blind.
It's been a very bad influence on
I've called.
Oops.
Jack 9-8.
Here I called pre-flop with 9-7 offsuit. Antonio raised only 1100. Most people raising to 14 or 1500 with the 2 and 4 blinds and the 100 ante. But it's really questionable. I'm out of position against him. I did get in cheap. I'm sure that influenced me. I probably wouldn't have called, let's say, an extra if he'd raised to 1,500, I had to call an extra 1,100. I probably wouldn't have called. And although I do want to get into some action, this was, 10 minutes into the show. I don't know, maybe 10 hands in. I don't think I'd even played a hand yet. So I was anxious to, start gambling up with these guys. But, I probably should have picked a better spot. But it ended up, I, kind of got a decent flop, flopped a pair and a gut shot. I could actually bet out here. That wouldn't be unreasonable at all. But normally I check, and I expect Antonio to bet behind me. With this much texture, there's not two to a suit, but it's kind of like right in the wheelhouse of someone defending their big blind. So it isn't. It definitely isn't a flop that Antonio would have to bet.
On the flop, Barry checks middle pair.
He's also got a gut shot.
Antonio checks bottom pair. 6 of spades on the turn.
Barry's picked up an open-ender, but Antonio's picked up a gut shot straight flush draw.
Barry bets 2,500.
After the check on the flop, Barry may think his hand is best.
Esfandiari calls.
Antonio's 8.
Okay, a couple things here. Antonio checked the flop, so what do I think? Well, probably the flop missed him. It's not a good flop for him. He could have, like we see he does, a piece of it, but he doesn't want to get played off it. He wants to keep the pot small. Now, when I bet on the turn and get called, you remember I talked about a situation, I called it actually a red light play, or a red light situation, where the guy checks the flop and then you bet and he calls and you think, well, he could really have a big hand, he was afraid to lose you. This isn't that situation because another card came off and he called. So when he calls me here, when I bet on the turn, I'm not thinking he has a big hand that he was afraid to check. I'm thinking it's one of two things. He has a marginal hand, maybe where he did have a piece of the flop, but he didn't want to get played off it, which we see, happen with the pair eights. Or he picked up a draw himself, either by having a 7 in his hand, maybe he had ace-7 of some other suit, or maybe he just picked up a spade draw. The 6 helped him by giving him a spade draw. Well, as we see, it was really a combination of all those kinds of things. He did pick up a draw with the spade, and even I guess as a gut shot draw also now. And he did have a small piece of flop that he didn't want to get played off of. So in my mind, I was thinking. I definitely didn't want to see a spade come off when he didn't raise. I thought I had the best hand with second pair. And the question is, what card should I be afraid of now? And you got to be thinking ahead. Most people say, well, why don't you just wait and see what it is? But then you're behind and you don't make good plays. So you want to be thinking, is a 10 or a queen, are those bad cards? Well, 10 makes me a straight. Could he have a queen? I guess he could have ace, queen of spades. He definitely could have a queen. A 10 is not even though it makes me a straight, I probably have the best hand now. A deuce is probably better than a 10 because he could make a higher straight. Is a queen a bad card? Well, actually, if he had a 10, like even ace 10 or 10-9 or something like that, or jack 10, those hands actually both have me beat. He probably would have bet the flop. Why would he check the flop with that? He's got a decent flop. Might as well build a pot. No reason to give any free cards like kings or something like that coming off on the turn. So a queen shouldn't make him a straight, actually, with this flop. A 10 would make him a straight, I think, more often than a queen. Spade's not good, so let's see what happens.
It's your beat, but he does have a very strong draw.
Queen of hearts on the river.
So, what should I do here with this Queen of Hearts coming on the river? Well, I don't think I'm ever going to get called by worse hands. I thought I had the best hand coming in, so it certainly makes sense to check. I'm checking, hoping he'll go check, check. And if he bets, there's 8,000 in the pot. Should I call? Well, he just had the dry flush draw, not the ace, queen of spades, but ace, let's say, small of spades. I've still got the best hand, so I could definitely make a good case for calling if he bets here.
He checks.
Queen's an overcard for Barry and also busts his draw. Puts a 4-card straight on board.
Antonio fires 5,200.
He may have picked up on the fact that the queen was a scare card for Barry.
Now here is what happens when you play a hand out of position. If I was in position, I wouldn't have had to give Antonio the information that I didn't make a straight. So if the positions were reversed here, he likely would check to me and I would check behind him and I'd win the pot. But now I put myself, by playing a bad hand out of position, in a tough situation where I didn't know what to do. And it's easy seeing Antonio's cards that, yeah, he had the flush draw and he didn't have that 10, so the queen's not as dangerous as I thought. And I think you can make a good case for calling here, but I've seen this hand and I make the wrong play. So let's play it out.
And Greenstein folds.
Antonio gets Barry to lay down the best hand.
So Antonio performs a little magic on Barry and runs the bluff to get his knight going in the right direction.
So, what can I say? I made the wrong play. It was a lot easier hand to play looking at his hole cards, as it seems like that makes all of us poker geniuses. But whatever. I certainly contributed a lot to my downfall. Like I say, playing a bad hand out of position against a good player, made the whole thing a little more difficult also.
Dead money.
And raises to 2,500.
Barry's going to raise his position.
Pocket nines for Rick.
And re-raise. There's the 25. Okay, so there's the 25.
Re-raises to 8.
So here's Rick Rahim. He was the businessman. He was playing a lot of hands, and I really wanted to get in there and play with him. And he raised me out of the blinds, and maybe we're deep enough. I've got 100,000 that I should call that extra. What is it? I guess 6,200. A lot to call with with 100,000. Might be right. We can see I have overcards. I'm not that far behind. If I pair one of those cards, I'm probably gonna have the best hand. But Queen 10 offsuit is such an easy hand to be dominated by, a re-raiser, either by bigger pairs, ace, queen, stuff like that. It's going to be hard to play. I'm assuming I'm going to face a bet, and unless I flop 3 of a kind or make a straight with this kind of hold'em, this kind of holding, it's just not a good hand. So in some sense, I was, as they might say, at the bottom of my range. So when he re-raised pre-flop, I assume I decided to just give it up.
8,700. And Barry folds.
It's too big, wasn't it?
Pot limit, but five.
If Barry knew what Rick had, he probably wouldn't have folded, which actually makes this a good re-raise by Rahim. Since he was only coin flip to win the hand, better to take it down pre-flop.
On the website. Ace Queen for Antonio. Raises to 1,100. Chow folds. Ace Jack for Rick Rahim.
Decent starting hand for Rick, but he is dominated.
Does call. 9-8 suited for the loose cannon. Also calls on the button. Fiffer folds. Barry's in as well.
I'm sure this is surprising that I call with 5-3 offsuit, and the smaller raise got me, and I certainly wasn't going after Antonio. But when I saw Rick Rahim and Troy Howard in the pot, those are the guys I want to play with. We're playing deep stack, no limit hold'em. So I wouldn't say I'd play any 2 cards, but a hand like this might end up making a low straight and getting paid off for my stack against those guys. And I have enough confidence in my play against them after the flop that if they happen to have a hand over hand against me, I'll get away a lot cheaper. So I'm not endorsing this play, but that's the reason for it.
The first 4-person flop of the night. 6-Jack-9. Check by Barry.
Deuce would have been better for Antonio. He just got out flopped by both Troy and Rick.
The Magician checks. Top pair for Rick, who bets $5,000.
It's a pretty big bet. Pot size bet into 3 other opponents is a very strong move. You do want people to call you with worse hands, though. He may chase away all of his action.
And it does chase Troy out. And Barry and Antonio.
Oh, Mr. Cannon. I'll show one time. Since I had it that time. I showed it.
Okay, Rick showed his hand. Didn't really mean anything. But anyway, didn't flop anything. Nothing much happened there.
It's the pot. Wait, you play a lot online, right?
No, I play live. I play live. I play at the casino.
What games do you play there?
I mean, it's a $200 max, guys.
Quick tip, if you don't want to seem out of your element, don't tell the table your max buy is their small blind.
He should listen to you, Joe. Barry straddles. Antonio folds. Chow.
Barry, is that a razor straddle?
Straddle.
Rick folds.
I like your style, Troy.
Jack 10 for the loose cannon.
Troy's reaching for chips. He may think his Jack 10 is a decent shot against two random hands.
Raises to 2,500. Vipper calls.
Uh-oh. There's about to be a poker game breaking out here.
Even though he was up.
Okay, here's the situation. I straddled, which means that Troy was in the small blind. I straddled meaning put on the 800 over the 400. You open, that's kind of a normal raise, a little over 3 times my straddle. Viffer called, and I'm behind them, and I think Viffer could have a pretty wide range there. Although he could make a nice play by slow playing something to me when I straddle, figuring I might go after Troy, and it is easy to go after Troy, as we've said on previous weeks. Him being the loose cannon on a limited bankroll. So with an ace in my hand, I might not have raised any 2 cards, and it may look like ace 7 is a piece of garbage. Well, it is garbage. I don't like to call with ace 7. I mean, a limit hold'em I'd call, but a no limit, there's value in an ace, but it also gets you in trouble. It's hard to play, weak aces profitably, because when you get money in, often you're out kicked. So it's, again, what I've said is I don't mind raising with bad hands. I don't like calling with bad hands. To me, this is a bad hand. And the ace in my hand, I look at that ace more as a defensive card. And what I mean by that is if I have one, there are fewer to go around, there are only 3 to go around for hands like ace king and ace queen, that might, if I raised here, play back at me. So I'll raise on this, and then if I get called, well, then I'll have to hope that either nobody hits or my offensive value of my ace, the times I flop an ace, work out for me. So the only other question is what to raise to. If there wasn't another player in, if it was just against Troy and Viffer hadn't called, a normal raise would be around 3 times Troy's raise to 7,500. With an extra player sticking 2,500 in, you expect me to raise closer to 10,000, or to make it 10,000. With that extra 2,500 in the pot.
Under the gun, Barry straddle bought in pre-flop position. After the flop, he still has position against the 2 blinds.
Barry re-raises to 9,000.
Because of his position, Barry...
Now, I only raised to 9,000 and not 10,000. And I think part of that was influenced by the thinking I had in the last episode, I think it was, of this play-by-play series, where I felt I'd over-raised on a hand and maybe given away my intentions, that I was just trying to pick up the pot. So, I raised, what I said to myself, I think, before this raise and what I do in these situations, I say, well, if I had aces or kings here, what would I raise to? I wouldn't be trying to scare them out. I'd raise a healthy amount, protecting my hand, but, if I'm going to raise to 9,000 there with aces and kings, I'm going to raise to 9,000 there with ace 7 offsuit, so they can't get a read on my bet size as to what I have. And you look at their 2 hands, are they going to stick in another 6,500? Jack 10 offsuit's kind of hard to. And Viffer, he could. We're deep, but he's out of position against me. Makes it pretty tough. So there's a good chance I'm going to pick this pot up.
His re-raising range is pretty wide. Now for Troy, he plays in a $200 max buy. His biggest win ever is $2,600. This raise is more than twice that.
You think he's doing that math in his head?
All he's saying is that's a lot of money.
And so he folds.
Well, if it wasn't pot limit before the flop parry, would that be like 90,000? Like, you know, but you can only make it 9,000 this time.
Hey, you're gonna win.
Nice, Amber.
I only have one move, all in.
You can't do it here, though. That's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like I saved like 80,000.
I didn't even know it was possible. See, my hand was too good to move all in.
Okay.
If I'd known...
Here, muck those cards real quick.
Biffer folds.
No angle shooting at this table.
that was...
Viffer and I have some history in some live cash games playing with some big bets. Some of them bluffs and some of them there. And so yeah, that's what he's talking about. So anyway, nothing much more to that hand except I'm kind of protecting my territory there. I straddled. I let both of them know. Don't think you can just pick up my blind that easily. And they do have to be aware of, coming in against me out of position. I'm going to make them pay sometimes, so they're going to have to tighten up their values. Okay, so now on to the next hand, we see I have King 10 offsuit. Let's see what happens.
Nine. Raise to 1,500. Antonio's out. Ciao. See ya. Rick Raheem, very aggressive so far in the session. Folds.
I'm sure I do fold.
Now the loose cannon in the big blind.
Troy seems to have a hard time folding his big blind. It's worked out well for him so far. But even though you're at a discount, you're almost always out of position.
He doesn't care. He calls.
He flopped trips last time. No care in the world.
6-6 jack, 2 hearts. Flush draw for Howard, who checks.
What do you think I'm going to bet here? I brought it in for 1,500. We can add up the pot and all that, and at this point I'm often betting between 1/2 and 3/4 of the pot. But I'm not doing that calculation at the table, even though it's not that hard a one to do. But if I brought it in for 1,500, as a rule of thumb, a head up, I'm going to bet 1.5 times that on the turn, on the flop, which would be 2,250. But on a flop with a pair where there's only 2 cards for the guy to hit, he's normally not going to call me unless he has a jack or a 6, maybe a pair in his hand or a flush draw. There's not a lot of things working here on the flop for him to call me with. So I can probably bet, what I say is these textured flops, 3 to a suit or here a pair or flops with an ace. I usually bet a little less because when I have it, I don't want to scare them away, and when I don't have it, I don't want to waste any money. So it's really obvious to me, knowing my game, instead of 2,250 here, I'm going to bet 2,000. If I bet anything other than 2,000, it's going to be a surprise. I mean, there are some times when the stacks are shallower, especially in tournament, I might just bet another even 1,500, the same thing I brought it in for. But with this deeper here, 2,000's the expected bet.
Greenstein fires 2,000.
Barry Greenstein continuation bets compulsively.
And Troy makes the call. Ace of diamonds on the turn.
So what would you do here? Obviously, it didn't hit me. I guess I picked up a gut shot draw. And it's easy looking at his hand that I actually have the best hand. But, I do have to be worried that he had a jack or a flush draw like he has, or maybe he's got even a pair of 5s, pair of 7s, pair of 8s, something between the 6 and the jack, a pair there or smaller. If I bet now, he's got to be afraid of that ace coming. And, as a general rule, if you have the betting lead and an overcard comes, there's a better chance that it hit you because you could have been betting with anything. That's one of the advantages you have in continuation betting frequently is your hand ends up being a mystery. And when that overcard comes, they don't know if it hit you or not. But it's not like they're going to be calling most of the time just trying to hit that 3-out overcard. It's not like you expect him to have ace-5. I guess he could call it down for value. Now he's spiked an ace. That's a good card for me to steal with once that overcard comes in the turn. So I'm not going to give him a free draw at his flush. Actually, if he's got a flush draw, there's a chance I even have him beat. The ugly thing for me is going to be if he had the nut flush draw, which he could have. and then I'm going to find out now by him raising me or just calling me, and at that point I may have to give up. You'll have to read the situation whether it's worth trying to fire a third barrel or not. But this is the moment that I've got to seize right here and try to take the pot down.
Check by Howard. 5,000 from Greenstein.
Barry's using his position well here.
And that.
And I guess the only other question that I should have asked is what was the amount to bet? I think the pot was 7,800 before that bet, and it's reasonable for me to think he has a flush draw, and even if the ace did hit me, I want to bet enough that he has to pay significantly for his draw. So, 5,000, I bet, I know a lot of the young kids like to bet weird amounts. I usually bet even amounts, and that seemed like a good even amount to find out if he had enough to keep going on the hand or if he would like to give up his draws, as we saw that he did.
We'll get Troy to fold.
Troy seems pretty reluctant to part with any of those gray 5K chips.
The loose cannon tried to defend his big blind and is now down $7,200. And Joe, it seems Troy is playing a lot of hands here early on.
Yeah, as we look at the vpip, which shows the percentage of hands where a player is getting involved pre-flop, the loose cannon is at 45%.
I had a feeling I wasn't playing many hands. I didn't get many hands. That's why you saw me coming in with a 5-3. 30% VPIP. I don't have one of those tracker problems. I don't even know what my normal amount is, 600. I would guess it would be closer to 25%. Just because, again, I don't know a lot about this stuff. I know these numbers that you see on VIF are 50% and 60% for Rick are high, so those guys are playing a lot of hands. And we see Chow down to 10%. It's only through 20 hands, so he voluntarily put money in 2 hands. But at this point, we all were kind of feeling Chow isn't there, isn't really playing many hands.
Next up is Viffer. He's at 50%, probably because he's trying to play pots with the loose cannon. But even more ridiculous is Rick Rahim, who's at 60% VPIP. He's bordering on Maniac.
It is early, but we're going to keep an eye on those stats all week.
Don't worry, I'll give you a gamble when you won a couple of pot.
Chow folds.
I'm gonna limp with a really strong hand.
Thank you, Rick. Taking my job.
I'm gonna raise with a stronger one.
Be careful, don't get too cocky.
I'm not. I'm just raising with a better hand.
All right.
Troy raises to 1,600. Viffer folds.
Despite his VPIP, Viffer knows better than to call with a weak ace.
Barry calls. And Rick is sticking around. So 3 to the flop.
First of all, I want to always call a raise. If he had raised enough, he would have forced me out. But he didn't really raise much more than the normal opening raise. A limp and a raise is a raise of a limp is usually a little stronger than just a straight raise because you've got some other guy to contend with. But certainly I had the 2 guys that I'd rather play against at the table in the pot, and I got a playing hand, so I'm going with it.
Barry's actually a slight favorite in this hand.
Queen 5-7. Barry checks with a flush draw. Rick checks with nothing.
Troy's flopped the best hand with a pair.
Now, of course, I could have three-handed decided to bet out. I've got a piece of the flop and my flush draw, but I don't want to create too big a pot. I don't have the nut flush draw, and do I really want to get raised? Troy's shown some pre-flop strength. Probably I'd rather keep it small, as small as possible on this hand, and maybe get in cheaply, maybe even get a free card or call a cheap flop, my flush that way.
Pair of sevens. He's ahead for now, but both he and Barry have similar chances of making the winning hand.
Troy fired 3,500. Barry calls, and Rick folds.
Barry's likely to know he doesn't have the best hand right now, but with a flush draw and 1 over, he probably realizes he might not be in bad shape.
Not a bad card for me. Oops, let me go a little further ahead. It was the 10 of hearts.
He's actually in great shape.
I just took the lead on this. I would rather had the ace of diamonds as the one card that gives me the nuts, and maybe would hit him also. Of course, he has the ace of diamonds in his hand, or smaller diamond doesn't give me the nuts, but it's kind of nice. But at least I knew this was a card that could have taken me into the lead. If he doesn't have a queen in his hand or a pair of jacks or better, I'm most likely in the lead at this point. So I could have bet, because it might go check check at this point. I guess that wouldn't be that unreasonable, but it looks a little weak, and it looks exactly like it is. Like I've got a mediocre hand that I think might be the best hand. And very often when people make those kind of bets against me, I raise them and try to take them off their hands, and I'm pretty successful at that. So I don't like making a bet in no limit hold'em where I pretty much tell the guy what I have. And there's probably better value here in checking and letting Troy fire again if in the situations where he doesn't have me beat. And when he does have me beat with that pair of jacks or a queen or better, I keep the pot small, and I get to draw cheaper than certainly if I bet and got raised. So I think it's, we already saw I did check, I think, at this point. And that was my thinking in checking. Keep the pot small. If it goes check, check, well, then I know I have the best hand. Maybe I'll get value on the river where he thinks I have a busted flush draw. And cards, again, think about ahead of time. Cards I don't want to see. I definitely don't want to see an ace at this point, and that's not even looking at his hand, because I'm afraid he has something like ace-king. I don't want to see a jack, because he might have ace-king, or he might have ace-jack, right? Those both meet me. If it went check, check, low cards, I think I still have the best hand. Those are all good. Pairing my 10, obviously a lot better than pairing my king. If I pair my king, I have to be cautious. He could have ace-jacks. Matter of fact, if it went check, check, and I paired my king, I might not necessarily bet, because I might figure there's better value check and letting him either try to bluff or see if he had a straight. Then again, I might bet just in case the king, if the king paired him, he's going to bet. I don't know what I'd do, but it's worth thinking about.
Now after a 10 on the turn, Barry checks.
Barry's made his pair, now jumped ahead of Troy.
Troy fires 6,500 this time.
Barry might not know he's ahead, but it's going to be tough.
Now, if we were short stacked at this point, I might even move in, thinking, why give him a free card if he's got me beat? If he's got a queen, he's got me beat, but we don't have much behind, and I might as well take away his draws. And if I'm wrong, I have draws of my own. But we're too deep for that. So I'm calling, and if nothing comes, I'm going to hope it goes check, check, because then I'll have the best hand. But at this point, Troy hadn't been that aggressive. I think there's a good chance I'm beat. I know that, with him betting here, I think that, I might, I very likely needed to draw it. I would think that more often than not, I have the worst hand.
For Troy to get him to fold.
Barry doesn't fold, he calls. The river, deuce of hearts. Barry checks, Troy checks, and Barry gets the best of the loose cannon again.
I see.
If Troy...
Yeah, once he checks behind me, the pressure's off. And when I mean pressure, I'm not feeling a lot of pressure. I mean, I think I now have the best hand unless he has two jacks. That's the only hand I expect to be shown that he might check behind, and that beats me.
Played more aggressively, Barry maybe would have folded, but it's pretty tough to fire again in that spot.
Barry adds to his stack.
That's 3. 3 times the charm.
Troy lost an additional 11,600 that hand.
I knew you had the flush draw. I just didn't know if you had a pair.
The School of Iffer prepares you well for the real world.
For the loose cannon, on the wrong side of things right now, limps in. Biffer calls. Barry's in as well. Antonio on the button.
This isn't a great hand. It was limped. We're deep. I'm in a good game, so I call with Queen 4 suited. But you can get in a lot of trouble in no limit hold'em calling with these bad, face card and a small card suited, because you make your flush, it's not the nut flush. We see already here Viffer has king 10 of clubs, and really I'm hoping to catch clubs here. I mean, I guess magic like 2 queens and a 4 or something like that. We see even if I catch 2 queens, I'm dominated by the queen 10. If I catch 2 4s, I'm dominated by the ace 4. I'm not in a very good spot here. Obviously, I wouldn't have called a raise with this hand. Hopefully, the one thing I have going for me is playing ability, where if I am beat, I'll get away cheaper, and if somehow I end up with the best hand, I'll do better. But right now, it's not looking good when we look at the hands I'm up against.
Calls.
I could raise the whole field. I hope I have a raising hand. Pretty good.
Rick set.
Well, here's another guy with clubs. In some sense, that's a good thing for me now that we see all the cards. I'm dominated, but it means that there's very little chance clubs are going to be coming out on the flop. I'm very unlikely to win this hand, and when looking at all these cards, you see what happens when you play garbage. You get into situations where you're pretty dead.
Actually got the best hand for the moment.
All right.
Bach. Rick checks his option.
Oh, and by the way, I'm not saying that it was wrong for me to call a limp against this field with that hand, but I'm more playing results now that we look at the hands, how bad a shape I was in. So I would do it again, because other times I'm not going to be against all these types of hands. And like I said, if you're a better player than the people you're playing against, you can get away with playing more hands. If you're a worse player than the people you're playing against, should you call with this hand? Well, the real answer is you should find another game to play in.
I'm pretty sure I have the
That's
best
like
hand.
false advertising.
I'm pretty sure I have the best hand. If he had folded, I'm raising.
That's how strong Chow's calling the small blind. Chow on the small blind scares everyone.
Family pot to the flop, which is 8 tray king. Chow checks. Bottom pair.
I'll take a shot. 25.
Middle pair for Rick. Fires 2,500. Loose cannon folds.
Any raggedy king? King 3 or king 8 this time?
I have a good king this time.
Do you?
A good king.
Oh, then maybe I can beat you.
Viffer calls with top pair. Action folds to
You have
Chow.
a bad king?
He folds.
Well, that's good. That means he probably won't hit his 3rd king.
Differ does have a good king this time.
Well, thankfully I didn't get an extra club coming up there. That would have gotten me in trouble. We see here that Rick bet with second pair. Viffer called him with top pair. And, Viffer could have raised, but it was a 6-handed pot. He doesn't necessarily think he has the best hand. Rick could even have, I think he was in the big blind. He could have, king 8 or king 3 or 8-3. He could have anything. So Viffer figures, and there are 2 spades up there. He's not trying to create a big pot. He's got a bluff catcher. He's going to beat all hands that aren't good hands. And we got a guy in Rick Rahim who will bet a lot of those hands. So Viffer's just playing it coy.
Rick's looking for an ace and 8 or running clubs.
Instead sees a 4.
That'll slow me down.
Rick checks.
I either got there or I'm scared that you got there.
Viffer checks.
This isn't true. You were already there.
5 of spades on the river.
So we expect, I guess Rick could bluff at it here, figures he doesn't have the best hand, but if Viffer called on the flop, what does Viffer have? A king or some spades. He can't beat the spades. I guess if Viffer just has a king, a big enough bet, the pot's 8,000, might get Viffer to fold.
I'm pretty sure I got the best hand.
Don't these guys know they're supposed to keep their hands a secret?
Alright, let's try 6,000.
Rick bets 6,000. Viffer calls the bluff.
No spade, you win.
And you see how wrong I was in my analysis. Maybe I could have gotten away with a bluff there, but Rick Rahim is getting paid off. And Viffer almost beat him in the pot with no spade on this hand. So good read by Viffer, and we'll see some situations. I think in this show I called Rick on some hands that I wouldn't have called other people with also.
King what? King of spades? No, space that the king 10. You call with no spade? I am so outclassed here.
Not only did he call him, he beat him into the pot.
And Viffer wins 20 grand.
Wow. Nice hand. Nice hand.
Viffer picked off the bluff by Rick, who's been the aggressor at this table so far, Joe.
Player's aggression factor applies to post-flop actions only, and right now Rick is already at 8. This may explain why Viffer called him down so light on that last hand. Rick seems to bet almost every time when he's checked to, and Viffer may be picking up on that.
You should not sleep well with that call.
He won't sleep well on new sheets he bought with your money.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to steam raise this hand.
Well, nice to announce your intentions. Viffer straddles, so action on Barry, ace-9 suited. Raised to 2,500. Action folds to the loose cannon. Ace-9 suited as well.
Decent hand, and we know Troy likes to defend his big blind.
He does so by calling. Oh, pocket kings for Viffer.
Pretty lucky to wake up with 2 kings in the straddle.
Raises to 10 grand.
Regardless of whether he has a hand or not, this...
Okay, what should I do? Is this like the hand where Viffer and Troy came in and I raised them and I had garbage? Could Viffer be raised with garbage? Well, of course he can. But this is drastically different. I raised in first position, so I should have something. And Viffer is raising now with me behind him. So he's going to have to play out of position, which is worth something also. So he really should have a decent hand. We see he has a good hand. I like ace suiteds, but do I really want to put another 7,500 when my stack is 10,000 and play against a good player? I got to think about it. Maybe if I had something like ace jack of diamonds, where I also have some straight draws available, and having a higher second card, ace jack, ace queen, something like that, means that I'll be able to beat some of the hands that he's raising with, specifically, let's say tens or something like that, by hitting my second card also. Here it's pretty clear that I either have to make a flush or hit 2 nines. I'm afraid if I hit my ace, I might end up dominated. That Viffer may have an ace queen, ace king hand himself. So it's, even though I'm in position, it's not that good a hand to call a big raise with. When you have ace suiteds and the other hands like this are small pairs, you consider them drawing hands that you want to get in cheaply with, and try to make your hand without putting too much money in and then getting paid off big. Hopefully, where you've got the nut flush and they've got second nut flush or a smaller flush. So it's not setting up right for this kind of hand. I don't want to put in a lot of money, so hopefully I won't read Viffer for just trying to steal and I'll get away from it.
This is a squeeze play, and Viffer is capable of squeezing with far worse than 2 kings. Barry's trying to figure out how often he'd do it with a hand worse than ace-9.
Barry figured it out and folded. So's the loose cannon.
This is your show, Tito.
My show? See, any kings will do, but 2 of them are better.
With 2 of them, you really have kicker problems. So.
See, I know you got kids. I don't want to.
I could have beat you right
You don't want them to think you're robbing it.
I could have flopped a straight flush. You never know.
I'm just saying. I don't want to. I would never abuse the children, actually.
That's not what I heard. Maybe not his children.
Raised me 25 times so far. He don't care.
Barry would re-raise his own kids if he thought they were putting in dead money.
What do you need?
Barry under the gun this hand. 8-6 suited. Raises to 1,500.
Barry's decided to continue to ride his bully reputation by raising light under the gun.
Chow also suited. Calls.
I don't know how much of a bully reputation I have. I'd rather have 8-7 suited, but we're 6-handed. I may not open that in first position unless I have people who are passive. If it's 9-handed game, I don't open that hand in early position at an aggressive table. But at a passive table, when I'm deep, I like getting in and playing pots with them. So I didn't think this was that strange of a raise. we really didn't have people, four betting or three betting that much. So I should be able to get to play a flop where I have the betting lead. We see here Chow called me with King 9 of clubs. I don't like that hand. I probably wouldn't have called Chow if the situation was reversed. And with me having the betting lead, I'm probably in better shape with my 8-6 of hearts than Chow is with his King 9 of clubs.
Rick on the button.
Wow. Yeah. Here comes the worst player with the worst hand.
Story checks out.
And this is the kind of action I'm looking for. I don't even have the worst hand against Rick. So let's see what happens.
Calls.
That is, of course, unless my friend at the other end decides to get in the pot.
Jack deuce.
Why does everybody always pick on the fat guy?
Oh!
He's got all the chips now.
You talking about you or me?
Not come Yeah, but see, you got muscle.
I had my head down. I thought he was talking about me.
No.
Then you said the fat guy on the game. You jumped on him too.
3 to the flop. 7 Jack 4. Barry bets 3,000 with a flush draw. Chow folds.
Barry's also got.
I don't know if you remember, but against two other players, I'll typically bet around double what I brought it in for, and fits into about the right percentage of the pot that I would have bet if it was heads up. So I bet a little more, because the pot's bigger. And here we see I'm a favorite, even though Rick actually flopped a pair and has the best hand. And I'm getting good action where I'm almost a 2-1 favorite. Lots of things could happen. Although you don't expect I'm going to be able to win anymore if a heart comes. But Rick was an action player, and that's the reason to get in with hands like this against an action player, where you might get paid off for more.
Got a gut shot. It's a semi-bluff.
Rick calls with bottom pair.
Rick knows Barry continuation bets like it's going out of style, so maybe his 4 is good.
It's not anymore.
Would you have bet here? I made my flush. A lot of people say it's a small flush. That's pretty vulnerable. You don't want to give a free card. But I'm playing against a guy who, if I check to, will bet a lot. And if I bet, there's too good a chance he'll fold. And we see if I bet here, he probably would have folded. Maybe not. Second pair and a gut shot, but 3 hearts up there, he probably should fold. So it's probably better for me to act like I just made a continuation bet. I've got ace-queen offsuit. I've got basically nothing, and he can just take the pot away here. Maybe I'd call him if one of those cards was a heart.
Barry connects on the flush and checks. Rick bets 3,000.
If you check to Rick, he's going to bet, despite the fact that both open-ended straight and flush draws have hit. Yep. You didn't misread your hand, Barry. That really just happened.
And Barry just calls.
And the reason I was looking back is, I knew I had the flush, and I wasn't looking back to see if I misread my hand. I was intentionally looking back as a reverse tell. I was trying to act like I had to check to see if I had a heart in my hand. I wanted to sell Rick on the idea that I looked back, saw, let's say, the ace of hearts, and decided it was worth calling. Because that way, if he has nothing, which what you're saying, what would you call on the flop with? Well, his hand is pretty close to nothing. Actually, it's too bad he has a pair. But it still's got to be to my advantage to make him think I'm still drawing.
The river. The 8 of spades. Barry checks again.
Now, I was just in the mode of check to Rick, let him bet. There is an outside chance that I could determine if he made some sort of big bet to just call and not raise him. That he has a bigger flush. I expected my hand was good. I was hoping he'd make a pretty big bet that I wouldn't feel like I needed even raise. But I guess if I think he just has a small pair, you can make a case, I guess, for me betting out because I have to be afraid he'll just check behind me at this point. I didn't think of it at the time because I still thought it was better to act like I was on a draw. And Rick, kind of bluff value bet some weird hands, as we'll see in the show. So I thought it was better just leave it in his court. And I don't think if I bet here he was going to call.
Check one pair, Barry. I'm pretty sure you win.
Yeah.
Yeah, Barry wins a pot of nearly $18,000.
Nice hand.
Barry's probably a little bummed Rick didn't make one of those classic river bluffs.
Yeah, I was hoping he'd bet. I didn't even think until I saw his hand now. I don't think I was even thinking that I should have bet on the river. But like I said, there is a case you can make for that. I still like the way I played it. Against a player like Rick, I'm just going to check and let him fire at me in a lot of situations. So that is the end of my play, at least for episode 1. I think I was up about 20,000 or so at this point, so it's always good to get ahead. And even more importantly than getting ahead and having money, or at least equally important, is you get other people stuck if you're ahead and they start playing worse. And you like to get in this situation where you feel you're playing their money and you're able to parlay it into a bigger win.